There are moments when the ocean hums like it's remembering something. Alara sat in the glow of her monitors, cross-referencing maritime data, when a shadow blinked into existence where no land should be. She froze. Coordinates 19 degree S, 157 degree W Pacific nothingness. Yet there it was, an island. It pulsed between frames like a heartbeat, visible in one scan, gone in the next. She zoomed closer, her breath fogging the screen, the cursor trembling. Official maps denied it. Historical logs swore it sank in 1923. But the feed, fresh from orbit, insisted otherwise. The world had forgotten this place, but the machines hadn't. Outside her cabin window, waves licked the hull of her research vessel, indifferent to discovery, and somewhere far below, something unseen shifted, as though listening to her find it again. Jonas' voice crackled through the radio, disbelief turning sharp. "There's nothing there, Alara." She replayed the footage again, every frame identical except one. "It's there," she whispered. The ship's deck groaned as waves rose, sensors flickering with data corruption. Jonas told her to shut it down to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The ocean around her had begun to feel aware, like an eye blinking open beneath the surface. Every rational fiber told her to dismiss it as error. Yet a quiet part of her, the one that still believed in the forgotten corners of the world, knew she'd just stumbled on a truth too precise to be myth. By morning, the coordinates had vanished. Alara scrolled through archived data, but every file referencing them had been wiped clean. Even her backup drive showed gaps, timestamps rewritten as if the ocean had edited history itself. She reached out to an old contact, Dr. Mail Oren, who hadn't answered a message in years. There were rumors she'd once led a government expedition to those same coordinates and returned, changed. Alara hesitated, cursor blinking over the unsent message. The sea outside was still, unnervingly so, as though it too was waiting for her to ask the question. The reply came faster than expected. A single line, "Don't go there." Attached was a photo, grainy, waterlogged, showing an island shoreline fractured like broken glass. Alara's heart thudded. She zoomed in until pixels dissolved into gray. The metadata had no GPS, no timestamp, no digital fingerprint. Jonas thought it was a hoax, another conspiracy threaded through seafaring myth. But Mail's warning felt real, desperate. "If it shouldn't be there," Alara murmured, "why does the Earth keep showing it to us?" Captain Roan met them at the harbor the next night, cigarette glowing like a warning in the dark. "You're not the first to look for it," he said, voice low, "but most who find it don't come back right." His weathered eyes flicked to Alara's map, tracing the coordinates with a thumb scarred by salt and time. "That island, Sable's Eye, we buried it for a reason." The wind off the pier tasted of iron, the sea beyond black as memory. Alara closed her laptop, gaze steady. "Then let's dig it up." The sea thickened into fog by dawn, swallowing the horizon until sky and water became the same colorless expanse. Alara leaned over the bow as Captain Roan steered by instinct, his instruments flickering dead. Jonas scanned the radar again. Flatline. Then, faint through the mist, came a sound that didn't belong. Waves breaking against something solid. "Land," Alara whispered. No one answered. The fog parted like breath on glass, revealing a jagged silhouette, an island rising from nowhere. The ship slowed to a crawl. The air turned heavy, electric. Alara felt her skin prickle, the hair on her arms lifting as though the island itself had seen her first. They anchored in shallow water, though the sonar insisted it was hundreds of meters deep. Alara leaned over the railing, staring at her reflection, except it wasn't hers. The face staring back moved half a second late, eyes darker, mouth still when hers spoke. Jonas called her name, and the image blinked away with the ripples. He laughed it off, nervous, while Captain Roan crossed himself and muttered something about echoes. Beneath the hull, a faint vibration pulsed through the ship. Steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat rising from the deep. The island's beach was coarse black sand, magnetic and warm underfoot. Every compass needle spun wild. Jonas tested the soil. Ferromagnetic readings impossible for volcanic rock. Elara set her equipment. Recording temperature, pressure, composition, all normal. Except for the wind. It carried whispers, syllables too soft to place. Roan refused to step further inland, staying by the tide with his cigarette trembling between fingers. "The ground hums," he said quietly. Elara felt it too. Subtle vibration in her bones, as though the island's heart beat beneath her feet. They moved inland. The foliage shimmered with metallic hues, leaves bending toward them like instruments sensing heat. The air smelled faintly of copper. Elara's GPS stuttered again. Coordinates looping endlessly, the map redrawing itself in real time. Jonas joked about the Bermuda Triangle. His laugh fell flat. Then they saw it. An obsidian archway carved from a single, seamless stone. Markings etched along its inner curve. Geometric, mathematical, but wrong in proportion, bending perspective itself. Elara reached out, fingers grazing symbols that seemed to shift beneath touch, rearranging themselves like thought made visible. As night fell, they set camp near the archway. The sound of the surf was gone, silence pressing in from every side. Jonas reviewed footage, his expression tightening. "It's different," he said. "The arch. It moved." Elara watched the playback. He was right. In the video, the structure stood meters closer, symbols rearranged. Roan whispered that he'd warned them. The air grew colder. Lights flickered on their equipment. In the dark, the island began to hum again. Low, resonant, calling something awake. Elara turned toward the sound, eyes wide. The island wasn't just there. It was listening. The next morning, a second vessel anchored in the bay, a ghostly shape cutting through the mist. Elara lifted her binoculars and froze. Standing at the bow was Dr. Mael Oren, eyes hollow but alert. She didn't wave, didn't smile. By noon, she was aboard, boots crunching the sand where the tide refused to rise. "You shouldn't have come," she said simply, her voice both warning and resignation. Elara showed her the readings, the anomalies, the arch. Mae looked toward the tree line. "It's not an island," she whispered. "It's a memory." Jonas frowned, calling it metaphor. But Roan stepped back, muttering that he'd heard this story before, years ago when the sea first swallowed the place and left nothing but silence. Maya led them inland, her movements precise as though retracing steps already taken. "It rebuilds itself," she said, pointing to half-buried ruins of glass and stone. "Every time someone remembers it, it grows stronger." Elara's recorder clicked softly, documenting each word. Jonas scanned the ruins, perplexed. Carbon dating impossible. Architecture inconsistent. The arches curved like waves frozen mid-motion. Walls mirrored light that had no source. Roan refused to follow further, claiming he could hear voices in the wind calling his name. When Elara asked Mael who built this place, she hesitated. People who learned too much about how the earth forgets. They found a stairway descending beneath the ruins, each step damp and cold. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, lighting the path without flame or electricity. Jonas joked weakly about movie cliches, but the sound of his voice was swallowed instantly. The air thickened, dense with pressure. At the bottom lay a vast chamber, circular, perfectly symmetrical, its center occupied by a pool of still black water. Mayella approached the edge, knelt, and placed her hand on the surface. "It records," she murmured. The reflection shimmered and showed not them, but another group entirely, faces blurred, standing where they stood now. "The last expedition," she said. "We never left." Jonas panicked. backing away, his flashlight shaking. "That's not possible," he stammered. But the reflection in the pool copied his movements a beat too late. Malay told them to stay calm. She'd seen this before. "The island holds impressions," she explained. "Every mind that's found it leaves a trace. The problem is knowing which one you are." Ilara stared into the water until she saw herself blink, and her reflection didn't. A chill swept her spine. Somewhere above, the island groaned like ice fracturing. "It's rewriting," Mel whispered. "It knows we're here." By dusk, the path back had changed. Trails curved wrong. Landmarks shifted. The coastline nowhere to be found. Roan's voice called faintly through the fog, though he'd stayed behind hours ago. Jonas yelled for him, but the echo came from every direction. The island pulsed again, louder this time, rhythm sensing with Ilara's heartbeat. Mel looked ill, eyes unfocused. "We're inside the loop now," she said. "Once it recognizes you, you stop being the visitor." Ilara turned toward the ocean, but there was only forest. She realized then, the island wasn't growing out of the sea. The sea was receding from it. Ilara unrolled her field chart on a basalt slab, the paper damp with salt, the pencil lines she'd drawn last night already shifting. At first she thought the humidity had warped the fibers, but the graphite was moving, contours creeping like tide lines, soundless, purposeful. Jonas swore and started filming. The 50mm lens breathed in and out as if the camera, too, needed air to accept what it saw. Mela didn't reach for the chart. "It imprints on anything that remembers shape," she said, voice steady, eyes circling the obsidian arch that now cast an impossible shadow against an absent sun. The coastline red-drafted itself, the cove sliding north by a hand's breadth, the jungle deepening where no trees stood a moment before. Ilara marked an X where they stood. The ground vibrated in response, a low, tungsten hum under the earth. "It's mapping us back," she whispered, and the arch shivered as if in agreement. Jonas tested the impossible like a scientist and a gambler. He shaved a clean erasure through a penciled ravine, graphite snow pooling at his thumb. The forest answered. A corridor of trees sighed inward and sealed, branches knitting with a hush like a theater curtain. Ilara felt pressure in her ears. Pop, pop. The world resizing to a tighter frame. "Erasure costs," Mail warned, kneeling to touch the rubbed scar on paper. "Each missing line asks the island to forget, and it makes room by taking something else." A gull hung motionless against the sky for 2 heartbeats, then resumed, displaced by the length of a breath. Jonas' bravado thinned. He tried to redraw what he'd undone. The pencil stuttered. The island refused. The arch glowed faintly, the symbols along its inner rim rotating like a plotting compass. "No more," Ilara said, palm flat on the map, feeling a pulse answer through the paper. They retreated to the pool chamber, with the map rolled like a scroll of contraband. Maela's voice carried low in the dome, candle warm against the cold blue glow. "We called it Protocol Obscura," she said. "Erase every instance. Charts, logs, memory palaces. We thought if no mind could hold the island, it would recede." Her gaze fell to the water that copied light with a half-second delay. "But the recorder isn't the map. The island is." Ilara pictured clerks blacking out pages, cartographers deleting layers, captains swearing oaths of silence. Still the afterimage persisted like a burn on retinas. Jonas asked what happened to the last team. Miley didn't answer at first. The pool answered for her. 4 blurred figures standing where they stood, one ripple short, one breath late. "We left our shapes here," she said finally. "The redactions only cut us out of the world that remembered us." Desperation sharpened into design. Ilara unrolled the chart on a flat route and drew a slender path from their mark to the bay. A careful line skirting hazards the way a camera tracks a subject through chaos. The ground ahead reorganized, ferns pivoting, stones shouldering aside. a breeze carving a lane that smelled like rain on copper. "It listens to intent," she breathed. Jonas stepped forward, boots landing where her pencil had led. For an instant his footsteps separated from him, prints appearing a fraction before he moved. He stared, shaken, at the lagging echo of himself. "Keep moving," Mally urged, eyes flicking to the arch now aligned perfectly with their drawn corridor. They walked, and the island obeyed, until the line met an old crease on the paper, a smudge from some previous hand. The path split around it in the reel, duplicating into two contradictory trails. "Choice," the island seemed to say, "is a drafting error." Night gathered fast, a dark room developing their fear into contrast. The arch symbols brightened like coals under a bellows, each glyph matching a contour on Ilara's chart. She felt a terrible clarity. The pool below was the island's drafting table, the arch its compass, the map a permission slip. If she traced a circle tight enough around them, could she hold their shapes in place? If she drew the sea back to the hull, would water remember their ship? Jonas pressed a flare into her hand. The red light painted everything confession red. Miles' whisper threaded the wind. "Whatever you close on the map closes in the world." Ilara's pencil tip met paper. She drew a clean ring anchored to the starless sky, then a line that arced toward where the bay should be. The earth thrummed. Far off, waves answered like applause from unseen seats, and behind them something stepped into the circle and refused to be excluded. The circle held like a breath caught in the world's throat, its graphite edge shimmering where lantern light kissed the paper. Ilara felt the boundary as pressure on her skin, a soft resistance, and then the thing that had crossed into it resolved. Not a creature, but a misalignment. A duplicate of the arch turned inward, like a lens folding light back on itself. Within its inner rim, their camper played at a slight delay, red flare stuttering, Mala's hair moving a beat behind the wind. Jonas reached to touch the mirage, and his hand passed into cold. Air that tasted of iron and rain guttered in reverse. The echo arch rotated with a click like a camera shutter, and the delayed version of them blinked, staring out with their own faces. Ilara tightened her grip on the pencil. If the island was a recorder, then the circle was a splice point. "Don't blink," she said, and watched herself obey a moment late. Jonas whispered that the circle might cut the echo loose if they severed it from the rest of the island. "Like isolating the frequency," he said, voice tight. Maella warned that the island corrected edits with interest. Above them, the canopy bowed inward, leaves angled like listening dishes. Ilara sketched a sharp chord across the ring, a chord that, on the map, sliced the echo arch from its parent. The world answered with a deep, gut-felt thump. The duplicate structure sheared sideways, dragging their delayed selves with it, the afterimages smearing like wet ink. Jonas stumbled, breath hitching. For a second, he was both here and there, his outline torn thin. Ilara erased the last millimeter, and the echo snapped. Clean, silent. The delay vanished. The forest exhaled. Somewhere far off the surf returned. Not where the bay should be, but closer, as if the sea had moved while they were busy with scissors and tape. They followed the returning sound of water through a corridor the map permitted, a narrow lane stitch marked by pencil. The island's hum modulated, lower, steadier, like a generator ramping. At the edge of the beach, the sea met the sand as if remembering choreography learned long ago. A single ship light burned in the mist, swaying. Roan's lantern. He stood by the tide line, face hollowed by worry and relief. "I lost you in clean air," he said, voice raw. "Then the ocean moved under me." Ilara held up the chart and felt shame bloom. She had dragged reality by its collar. Roan looked past her to Mael. "It didn't let you go last time. It won't now." The arch inland chimed once, high and thin. Jonas angled his camera toward the surf. In its viewfinder, the horizon curved wrong, A smile cut too wide. The island, content for the moment, watched them pretend that the shore was safe. Roan said the engines would not start until the island relinquished their weight. Metal groaned like a stubborn door. Elara studied the chart and understood the trap. The circle that stabilized them also pinned them like specimens. To leave, she had to open what she'd closed. Mayala's hand hovered over the paper. "Careful," she said, eyes locked on the arch whose glyphs now matched every contour line like teeth in a gear. Jonas argued for a narrow gate. Roan demanded a straight line to deep water. No curves, no poetry. Elara drew an aperture. 2 ticks in the ring aligned to the compass she no longer trusted. As the gap formed, wind tunneled through unseen stone, carrying the scent of ozone and old coins. The circle dimmed. The island stirred, pleased or hungry. She couldn't tell. "We run on my mark," Roan said, shoulders set, and the ship in the bay dipped as if nodding yes. They moved as one. Roan sprinting for the skiff, Jonas hauling cases, Mally limping slightly, though she insisted she wasn't hurt. Elara gripping the map hard enough to crease continents. The air thickened at the gate, a membrane resisting their exit, then broke with a wet pop that echoed out to sea. The skiff scraped water, engines coughed, caught. The shoreline slid backward with unnerving grace. Elara didn't look behind until the arch rang again. Lower, final. On the map, the ring that opened began to close of its own accord, graphite knitting like flesh. A single mark remained inside with them, a small black dot that hadn't been there before, labeled in a hand not hers. It sat where the pool chamber should be. Anchor. Mel saw it too and went white. "It's not letting us go," she said softly. "It's coming with us." Out on the swell, the island held its shape and smiled with the horizon. The trawler shuddered as if a second hull slid alongside it, unseen and perfectly matched. Roan kept the throttle pinned until the engine's scream thinned to a ragged prayer. Elara spread the map on the galley table. The dot labeled Anchor pulsed like a metronome, sensing with the engine's misfire. Jonas filmed the compass, which twitched between true north and something a degree off. A north that wanted them. Mayal traced the circle Elara had drawn earlier and flinched when the paper hummed. "It boarded with us," she said. A carried place. Overhead, a solitary bulb swayed, casting their faces into pendulum halves. The ship's windows showed a calm sea, but the deck listed as though surfing a swell that didn't exist. Elara pressed her palm over the dot. The hull answered with a low groan. "Would remembering wait? If the island is a recorder," she said, "then we are its song now." Storm lines bruised the horizon by dusk, a wall of rain stitched to the sea with silver thread. Roan angled them away, but the ship crab-walked, responding to a current charted only on Elara's paper. The radio spat fragments, coordinates, call signs. Then a clear voice she knew too well. Her own, delayed by half a second, warning of reefs that didn't exist. Jonas killed the set. His face drained. "It's echoing through channels now." Mayel opened a waterproof case and produced a yellowed manifest, stamped with ministries and secrecy. "My expedition signed this to make it forgettable," she said. "But an erasure isn't absence. It's pressure." Lightning tore the sky, backlighting a shape that was not land and not sky. A negative cut of coastline hovering above the waves. Elara drew a tiny triangle on the map where the thunderhead was darkest. The storm pivoted like a camera pan. Something in it turned to face them. The first wave hit from inside the hull. A concussive thump that rattled cutlery and memory. Jonas staggered, cameras spinning, catching frames of chairs sliding uphill. Roan swore and threw the rudder hard to port. The ship obeyed a second late, as if the Echo piloted first. Elara flipped the map to its blank side and drew the cleanest thing she could imagine. A straight channel, lighthouse at the end, a horizon that didn't smile wrong. The deck leveled. For 3 breaths, the world agreed. Then the anchor dot bled through to the blank page, soaking it with certainty. Mala grabbed Alara's hand. "We need a counterweight, something the island can prefer to us." Silence coiled. Rowan looked to the hold where spare anchors, chain, and fuel drums slept. "We give it mass," he said. "A new memory heavier than ours." Alara nodded, hating the logic, loving the chance. Jonas was already unspooling chain. They built a lure. A cage of chain and steel weighted with drums, a crude geometry meant to satisfy an island that admired lines. Alara inked a second circle on the map, smaller, deliberate, around a spot off the stern. "We gifted a boundary," she said. Roan nodded once and let the cage go. It plunged, chain singing, the trawler rearing like a spooked horse. The sea bulged outward where the circle was drawn, a crater without wall, and the lure vanished into its throat. The pulsing dot on the map slid aft and settled inside the new ring. Pressure lifted from the decks, windows stopped shaking. For a breath, the ocean became ordinary. Dull, mortal, Jonas laughed, wild and relieved. And the sound made Alara ache. Mela didn't celebrate. "It will test the line," she said. "Everything that remembers them wants them back." The bulb above flickered once, as if the ship had blinked. Near midnight the sea went silent, a velvet hush that swallowed motor and wind. The map cooled beneath Alara's fingertips. The anchor dot did not move. Roan cut speed and let them drift. Stars pricked through cloud like cautious eyes. "We bought distance," Mela said, voice barely more than breath. "Not freedom." Alara nodded. The circle they'd cast aft glowed faintly where graphite caught lantern light, and for the first time she felt the island's attention shift. Not gone, but curious, as if considering a bargain. Jonas set the camera down and looked at her, the bravado gone. "When this is over, who will remember us right?" Alara didn't have an answer. She drew a final line on the blank page. A promise more than a plan. Port lights, human voices, a shoreline that had no interest in being myth. The hull sighed. Somewhere behind them, deep and satisfied, the sea accepted the gift and turned its face away. Dawn peeled the storm from the sky like wet gauze, revealing a dull band of coastline that should have tasted like relief. Harbor cranes rose out of the mist, honest angles, human-made, and Alara felt the map warm in her hands as if recognizing kin. The aft circle still faintly glowed. The weighted lure dragged a private gravity through the wake. Roan guided them toward the breakwater, expression fixed in a prayer he didn't speak. Jonas checked his camera, then didn't raise it. Mel pressed her palm to the cabin window and flinched. Reflected in the glass, the harbor arrived a half-beat late. "It's riding our shadow," she said. The radio crackled with port control, names and numbers correct and ordinary, and yet Alara sensed the island listening to those syllables like open doors. She drew a thin line on the blank page. Berth, customs, coffee, and the ship obliged, nosing toward a dock that smelled like rope and diesel, and a life not made of echo. Officials met them with clipboards and polite suspicion, their pens moving in neat strokes that made the world legible. Alara answered questions by the book. Origin cargo, itinerary, feeling each word ripple the invisible thing behind them. Jonas opened his case. The last hour of footage was blank static, the reel before it sharp as glass. Mael produced the stamped manifest that once erased her voyage, and the younger officer's face changed the way paper does when soaked. "We don't keep these anymore," he said softly, as if remembering a rule he hadn't learned. Rowan signed, initialed, shook a hand too long. The harbor noise thickened. Gulls, forklift beeps, chain clatter. Ordinary sound like ballast. Alara watched the aft circle on the map fade, then brighten. "Undecided. If we lock it," Jonas whispered, "we feed it. If we don't," Mala said, "we become it." Alara's pencil hovered over the line that would write the harbor's name. Decision became architecture. Alara unrolled both pages, the marked world and its blank twin, and laid them edge to edge. The anchor dot throbbed between, wanting a place. It follows the strongest contour, Mael said. Give it shape it prefers to us. Roan fetched harbor charts, dredge lanes, mooring fields, the honest geometry of commerce. Elara began to draw a circle not around them, but around a dry dock basin slated for repairs, a ring with gates and schedules and workers who would curse delays. She labeled it with the most boring word she knew: maintenance. Jonas stared. You're hiding a miracle in paperwork. I'm giving it a quieter story, she said. The pencil completed the ring. Air changed. Somewhere behind cranes and warehouses, water cupped itself into that newly promised shape. The aft pressure eased, sliding shoreward like a patient cat. The ship lifted free by a finger's width, and Elara felt the island's attention swivel. Away, but not gone. They walked the pier to watch the transfer none of the workers could name. The dry dock's gates yawned open, and the basin seemed to receive a weight without object, water dimpling as if cradling a sleeping animal. Elara felt the pull in her ribs lessen, like being unhooked from a tide. It will leave fingerprints, Mael warned. Cranes that rust too fast. Steps where nobody walks. Jonas swallowed. And us? Elara looked at the map, at the original circle that had held their shapes. Her name on the page glimmered faintly, where graphite met oil from her skin. She took an eraser, and with care that felt like prayer, rubbed only the letters of herself away, leaving the line and the harbor intact. Not absence, softness. The eraser crumbs lay like ash. The air did not darken. She waited for pain and found instead a hollow clarity, a space where the island had nothing sharp to grip. Let it remember the line, she said, not the hand. By evening the trawler rocked at an ordinary berth, ropes creaking in a language the sea has always spoken. Port lights came on, amber beads along a human shoreline, and the world held. Jonas filmed the cranes against a normal sky and looked relieved to be bored. Rowan counted moorings, superstitions satisfied. Mael stood apart, reading the harbor as if it were a patient waking from surgery. Elara closed the map and sealed it in plastic, not to hide it, but to deny it breath. On her phone, the live satellite feed refreshed. Cloud bands, shipping lanes, and there, far off the charts, a faint crescent where no land should be. Visible in one frame, gone in the next. She felt no panic, only a stern affection, like recognizing an old scar by touch. The island hadn't vanished. It had accepted a quieter name and a new address. Let it be, she whispered, and the sea, for once, agreed.